All right. Hey, everybody. Good morning. Glad to have a very diverse group in here, man. And yes, everybody, I did make a joke. Jude was the first one in. Jude from Chicago. I did say, hey, Jude, get over it. It's a great song. Easily one of my favorite Beatles songs of all time. Glad to have everybody here. Make sure you grab your coffee. We'll get kicked off in just a minute. We got folks on from London, from Chicago, from Barcelona. Man, I miss Barcelona. Dr. Abdullah in Saudi Arabia. Hey, Dr. Abdullah, glad that you could be back. Again, just a great group that's here. So we are about to kick off, everybody. Like I said, make sure you have your coffee. All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the 47th, good Lord, 47th episode of FinTech Insider, the Breakfast Show US. I'm Sam Maule, Lebanon Best Director of North America. I'll be your host for this morning's show. Do let us know where you're watching from, and really do let us know where you are in the world. We will give you a shout out, and please share the link. If you look down, you'll see the link. Share that thing. Hit the like button, and please subscribe to 11FS on LinkedIn so you never miss a show. If you haven't read our latest research report yet, the link will be in the post here. Bianca with the beautiful hair. Bianca, you got to get a picture of that in here. We'll post that from our London office. It talks about the needs of SMB owners in the U.S. and how financial institutions can make propositions to better serve them. Head over to bit.ly/DIGITASMB or click the link. We also did a research report with Plaid about how open finance will shape the industry. You can get that one at bit.ly/openfinance2020. And that one has been really doing well, folks. So highly recommend you download it. Give us your feedback. All right, first off, 3 news stories from the past 24 hours that caught my attention, and they should have yours. The first from TechCrunch, they report fintech startup Klarna is launching a rewards program called Vibe this summer. Great name, Klarna. Good job. If you use Klarna as your payment method, you'll start earning points for every $1 you spend. You can then redeem your points for gift cards at Starbucks, Sephora, Foot Locker, and Uber. Klarna is best known for its buy now and pay later feature, which lets you pay over 4 installments with 0 interest. You can think of Klarna as sort of a credit card alternative payment method, as you don't have to pay for things right away. Many e-commerce websites have added Klarna as a payment option to increase sales. It can now increase conversion rates for expensive purchases in particular. We've had many folks from Klarna on. Snoop Dogg, who's a spokesman for Klarna, have yet to get him on. And when we do, David Breer will have a heart attack. Next story is American Banker. They report the New York State Department of Financial Services is launching an expanded program to help technology startups, including fintech firms, navigate the regulatory space. The service, called FS Fast Forward, goes live Tuesday and expands on a pilot program the state regulator started for insurance tech companies, Project Whitehall, in February. Now, innovators in finance, healthcare, and insurance will be able to submit questions and consult directly with regulators on specific compliance issues for their products. As New York begins reopening, new cutting-edge and innovative solutions will be needed to adapt the New York marketplace to a new normal post-COVID, said a spokesman. Good move, New York, by the way. I love that idea of being able to reach out directly to the regulators with your questions, much needed in order to keep this stuff moving forward. And our next story, last but not least, Banking Dive reports U.S. Bank has pledged Friday to boost loans to Black-owned business by $100 million. That's one of the several initiatives the bank introduced in response to last month's death of George Floyd and the subsequent civil unrest. Floyd, who was Black, was killed by a white police officer May 25th in Minneapolis, where U.S. Bank is based. The company also established a $15 million fund to award community grants to organizations across the space. Bank of America, by the way, also said it would donate $1 billion over 4 years to help communities address economic and racial inequality exacerbated by the coronavirus pandemic. The funds will be directed to programs that focus on health, jobs, small businesses, and housing in areas with high numbers of non-whites, the bank said. So that's going to really be our topic today, talking about diversity. And let's get our guest in today. We are super excited to be joined by Linda Saye. Today, we're going to talk about the importance of diversity and inclusion in the financial industries, a topic very important at this time. And Linda has had quite a bit of experience in talking about diversity, running different programs, and leading this. So I'm happy to have you here. Linda, where are you at in the world today?
Well, hey, Sam, it's great to be here. I'm actually in Atlanta, Georgia, in my home office.
I can't hear Linda. Oh. So I'm asking my provider to talk in my ear, my producer. Awesome. I can, Tobias, but I can't hear anybody else. I'll log back in real quick. All right. Back. Are we back?
Hi.
Hey, everyone. Sorry. Everybody, again, we are stuck with LinkedIn's product. I'll just say that nicely. Linda, thrilled to have you here. So again, why don't we get a quick introduction for you to everybody? If you kind of talk about, and a lot I'd like to hear about is the RISE program that you helped put together. The RISE Up.
Thank you, Sam, first of all, for having me on. And I'm in Atlanta, Georgia. Little quickly about my background. I have been in Atlanta for a very long time and kind of did the payments rounds. I was always in marketing, VP at First Data, then at Verifone, then NCR. I actually thought I was going to leave the industry when Money2020 kind of came along. As somebody that always went to Money2020, I thought it was really interesting to be kind of curating the content and the thought leadership that fueled our industry, which I love our industry. It's such a fabulous, amazing, interesting industry. So I was quickly asked to build this RiseUP program. It was something that I personally was passionate about as a woman in the industry. There are many times that I was the only woman in the room. And I was working with product teams that were all white men. And so asking to basically market these products in a vacuum, I was already passionate about these types of issues. So when Money2020 asked me to build the RiseUP program, which is a gender-specific program to start, and the idea for that was to accelerate our future female leaders in the industry. So I quickly raised my hand. It was my nighttime and weekend job. Lovingly, I was thrilled to be doing this and building something really amazing. The goals were because the program is still going on strong, but basically to give women the skills and actionable content they need to go back and get ahead, to provide them with mentoring and networking. And then another piece of that was a personal goal of mine to get these ladies on the stage, because many of them don't have that experience, but they're they're amazing women with a lot of knowledge, and yet they weren't able to get on that stage. So that was also one of my goals with RiseUP.
One of my favorite Twitter trends out there. I do love Twitter. I think everybody out here knows that. Though was and it's still out there, but I believe it was a Twitter feed called Manels, so a take on panels. But it would just be pictures of of Manels over and over and over again. And I personally, and I know Linda, you're there too, I always get frustrated when folks are like, yeah, we'd like to have women speakers, but we just can't find them. I'll go ahead and call bullshit on that. And I will just say the same when it comes to people of color. Erica, who's been on this, I can't remember Erica's last name off the top of my head, but she's done this show before. She runs Stitch Crew out in Oklahoma City. Oklahoma is doing the state and the governor's office is doing a whole panel and talk on social justice and what we're going through. And the funniest part is they couldn't find one black person to be on the panel. Is their excuse. That's bullshit too. I'll just call that out. I think we're doing a lot of that right now, calling a lot of stuff out. I feel rather depressed about that. And I want to throw this stat out here because it is rather funny, because I made the joke, this is two white people talking about diversity. This is a man and a woman talking about this. There's a little bit of diversity here because I'm over 50. So there you go. So I represent the over 50 crowd. And Linda, you from a female perspective. But there was a lot of stats I looked up. So for example, I know this one will be near and dear to your heart. CNN reported the number of women running Fortune 500 companies has hit an all-time record this year
Yes.
of 37. Even though the number of female CEOs is up, that's still only 7.4% of the Fortune 500 ranked businesses. So well done. We're getting better. There's only 33 last year.
Right.
No, so we increased by 4. So small steps, I guess.
That's what I see, Sam. I see this all the time. It's very much baby steps.
Yeah.
And we take a few steps forward and then a few giant steps back, it seems. So it's funny that you said that stat, because I was going to also say that stat.
That's a good stat.
It is a good one. Another one is that there's only 21% representation of women on executive teams in North America. But yet there's 45% women in the workforce.
Yeah.
A little bit of disparity there.
We're going to talk about this. I can't remember if it's next week. My producer will tell me. We have the management author, Tom Peters, coming on. If y'all don't know who Tom Peters is, you didn't go to get your MBA in the US. But Tom's been writing about management since the early 80s. And but his biggest, 1st of July, we'll have Tom Peters on. Voice in my ear just told me that. And I've had the chance to interview Tom before. I love him. And one of the things he screams about is if your board doesn't reflect your customer base, you got a problem.
Exactly.
Which includes people of color, which includes women, which you take your pick, right? I love that quote. It makes my day. And not only, so we talked about women real quick, but another stat that kind of blew me away. According to Fortune magazine, there are only 4 Black CEOs on the 2020 list of the 500 CEOs of the top 500 companies in the US. So these include Marvin Ellison at home improvement retailer Lowe's, Ken Frazier at Merck, Roger Ferguson at TIA. Way to go, TIA, correct? There's a financial services company, the only one I'm going to name. And Jid Zelton at Tapestry. That's it. So there's only one Black woman to ever helm a Fortune 500 CEO, and it was at Xerox, Ursula Burns, who's a legend. She stepped down back in 2016. I mean, that's it.
Right.
I mean, that's 0.8%, everybody, 0.8%, despite African Americans representing 13.4% of the U.S. population.
That's right. It's embarrassing, really.
It is.
It really is.
It's frustrating.
It is frustrating. And, you know, from my background, when I was a marketer and I'm sitting in a room with product managers, you know, that are all white, and then trying to have to sell that product. I pushed this from early on, from way back before diversity and inclusion was even, you know, a phrase that people were looking at. But you can't represent the voice of the customer with a round table of white men. You just can't. And so teams that are more diverse and inclusive, that's the key too, Sam. It's not just diversity, but it's inclusion. And to me, they're equally as important, because you can check off the list and put diverse people in a room together. But if they don't feel like they're being heard and you're building an inclusive environment, it still will fail. So, but if you do both of those, there's so much research that shows that your company will be more resilient. You'll be more innovative. You'll be able to reimagine. And those are all absolutely critical skills for, especially today, as we go through this pandemic and then post-pandemic. So that's the competitive advantage, right? That's where companies that get it will do so much better. And I'm a firm believer, diversity and inclusion is the enabler for a healthy, robust business and how we will recover as we get through this pandemic.
Yeah, I just posted a link for everybody, a Twitter post. Please take a look at it. So we interviewed Arlen Hamilton, who is, I think, like that interview went out 2 weeks ago, if I remember right, on last Friday. Arlen is a VC, has a new book come out. She's the founder of Capital, I believe is the name of it, or Backstage Capital. I love Arlen because she's a woman, she's Black, she's gay. She didn't go to Stanford or MIT or Harvard. Kind of fits. She breaks every stereotype there is, but she pointed that out. And in the post I gave everybody, it's a Black founder, a woman founder in Detroit, my hometown, who does dolls for people of color. And what I'd encourage you to do is look at that doll that she created, and then go look at a black Barbie from the 60s. Well, probably wasn't even the 60s, the 70s, right? Which one's actually along the lines?
Yes.
You know what I mean? I mean, and I think I've said this on the show before. I grew up in Detroit. Mom's side of the family was Jewish. I grew up, my black aunt, Mamie, more or less raised me. My black cousin Kenneth was my best friend until he passed away, unfortunately, a couple years ago. I have black nieces and nephews whose parents have to have that talk with them. And if you live in the US, you know what I mean by that talk.
That's right.
I'm just shaking my head in frustration, Linda. I'm just being blunt.
Well, you know, Sam, I have a lot of black and brown friends who are mothers, and I have to admit to my own naivety here, and really had to look hard at myself, because I don't know what it's like. I have a 16-year-old boy, but I don't know what it's like to have that talk with my boy. And after talking a lot to my black and brown friends over the last 2 weeks, especially, I realized I am part of this problem. If I can't talk about this and acknowledge my half of this, my part of the problem. And so I can't even imagine what that feels like as a mom to have to say that to your, especially your boys.
Yeah, I think it is a matter of, there's one thing to acknowledge a problem, right? And this goes, and we're talking diversity across the piece. So we are talking people of color, we are talking the LGBTQ, we are talking women, representation in the workforce. Yes, you should, I'll just go ahead and get this argument out of the way. Yes, you should hire the people that are the most talented, that can drive your business forward. But it is amazing time after time, if you take away a person's pick or their last name or their surname or their gender, and what you see from hiring, when it's just straight out, here's their background and what they can do.
Yep.
You remove that from the picture, it's amazing how much stuff shifts.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one thing, you know, that companies should be doing now, is removing any kind of indication as they're looking at prospective employees. Any indication of name, race, any of that stuff that can cause that unconscious bias in the hiring process. I would challenge companies to do that.
Yeah.
And see what kind of diversity you'll get from that, just based on what their experiences and their knowledge. And I think it could be a much different story.
Sidharhar, as usual, just raised a great question. Sidharhar, a company founder out in San Francisco. Sadly, top brilliant employees often are the worst offenders when it comes to violating this principle at a company. Companies put up with this because they need the brilliance, which is unfortunate because it sets a culture. How should a company handle this very dilemma? I'll give you my 2 cents on it, and then Linda, I'd like yours. David Breer, our CEO, has said many times this quote, it's better to have a hole on your team than an asshole. So there, Sidharhar, that would be how 11FS approaches this. Linda, how would you reply to that?
Yeah, I love that.
I'm here. It's 11FS. It's our show. We can say this if we want. All right.
Right.
How would you reply?
I feel that, well, part of what I just said, where you remove kind of any indication of that bias, you know, from the very beginning, is a big step. But there also has to be, I'm a firm believer in those teams that are already there have to start listening to each other, feeling each other, knowing each other, and walking in their shoes. It's called empathy. And for that, it's a big piece of this, to get everybody kind of working together and supporting each other. And the way to get to that is to have an inclusive forum where people feel heard and can feel safe in getting to know each other. I think that's really important. You're going to have assholes. You are. And, you know, I think as you kind of get to a place of a more inclusive environment, those people kind of get weeded out, because they're not going to be, it's not acceptable anymore.
Yeah.
And the more people feel inclusive and heard, the more they feel comfortable kind of weeding out those types of people. It's just bad karma. It's bad energy. Who, as a manager, who wants that on their team?
So a couple more statistics for everybody. According to Fast Company, statistics from 2017 show that Hispanics make up to 17% of the labor force, and I guarantee you since 2017 that number has risen. However, they occupy only 4.3% of executive positions in the U.S. Hispanic representation is roughly equal to that of Black executives and somewhat lower than Asian American executives. And I'm going to keep doing this, people, because I do like statistics. So one more from CNN: straight leaders still dominate the C-suite, but there have been a handful of LGBTQ milestones in corporate America recently. So Apple's Tim Cook famously came out in 2014, and in March, James Fitterling became the new CEO of the Dow Chemical Company. This week, Land O'Lakes made headlines by naming Bush Ford as his first female CEO, but her appointment marks another milestone. She's the first openly gay CEO that they had. And by the way, since under her leadership, Land O'Lakes, you might notice in the U.S. they changed their branding a little bit when it comes to Land O'Lakes. Shockingly, a racist, in my opinion, old school branding that they had. So it's amazing what can happen when you introduce a little bit of change. E. Jude, who I said hey Jude to early in the show, had raised a good point. It's important to show and tell. I'm first generation, born in Chicago, so we take our son to places like the Bahamas and Mexico so he can see, feel, and know how people are outside of America. Yes. Couldn't agree more.
Absolutely. I think that sometimes, and I'll just speak from my own experience with my own 16-year-old boy, white privilege, we're the epitome of that, right? But I feel like he really needs a global perspective. And so, we were planning on going to Uganda this year in March, to do a mission trip just for that very reason, because he needs to see more of what's outside of this country and even in our country, even in South Atlanta. I live in Atlanta, Georgia. So, even in South Atlanta. But that's why, for me, it's really important that we volunteer and start getting a feel for what others have to go through. And that's part of that empathy and walking in their shoes and really, really understanding what other people are going through.
Yeah, I think empathy is the key word. I've said that, I think, since the very first show we started doing this back in April, that, you look at what's happening with COVID. I mean, here's the reality, everybody. This is globally, but here in the U.S., we obviously have a health pandemic that's taking place, but we also have a cultural and societal pandemic that's taking place. Just, turn the news on at any point in time. And what I find interesting, especially when it comes to this topic of diversity, and I'll cut it down from just a racial standpoint. Part of the response to COVID here in the U.S. kind of reflects what's happened on the social equality side, meaning we've got a segment of society that's just saying it's fake news, that COVID doesn't exist, it's a hoax, or two, it's past. Not true, by the way. We're seeing the numbers increasingly go up for here in Florida, for example. It hasn't passed us by. Ignoring it is not a solution to ending a health pandemic, as it is not a solution for ending a cultural and societal pandemic.
Yeah.
Sam Maule,
I agree,
preaching
Sam.
from the, sorry, folks. I wanted to be a preacher when I was young. So, which is quite funny for those that know me. They're like, oh my God, no, that would be bad. So E. Judd said, seeing is believing. I love that commentary. I couldn't agree more. Linda, and I know I've heard you talk about this. I've had Scarlett Cyber, who's a good friend. Yes, Scarlett. I would say her name wrong. She's like, she's going to kill me because I always call her Cyber. She's like, you've known me for years. But Scarlett has said this, right? When she was walking the halls at some of the large banks, she said, what struck me the most is when I went around the executive halls, I didn't see a lot of people that looked like me.
That's exactly right. And that's my story too. I kept bumping up against, I'm the only white woman in this room. I'm the only woman in this room.
Yeah. And
it was very, very frustrating, which is why RiseUP was such a passion project for me, because that's got to stop. It's baby steps. It's going to take a long time. I'm so thrilled though with the RiseUP program. There were 4 different programs with more to come. Because of those programs, we've had over 200 women in the academy that have gone through it and experienced it. Over 1,500 women globally have applied to be part of the program. They're all phenomenal women, every one of them. And that's why they're in the program. So, it takes these kinds of initiatives, and this one's specifically gender, but we need this across the board. And we just really need to have a shift in our thinking. And the pandemic and the protests are a pivotal moment in time here, I feel. Agree. And I do feel a shift happening. We all need to do better. This is kind of my soapbox for the moment. We're all, as leaders of some of the most amazing companies in the world in this industry, we really have an obligation to do better and to really make this happen. It's not a luxury.
Right.
It's an imperative that we do this.
And so Linda,
I'll stop there.
No, I agree with you. Linda, you're based in Atlanta. I've worked out of Atlanta for 10 years in the 90s. Really the home, if you will, of civil rights. I think it's safe to say that in the U.S.
Yes.
So, and Atlanta has a history of that.
Yes.
So for example, if you want to hear, two of my favorite responses, or one of my favorite responses to what's happening right now in the protesting, it went viral on Twitter, but Killer Mike went on stage when some of the rioting was taking place. He went on the microphone and gave one of the most compelling talks I personally heard, with the mayor and chief of police standing right behind him, which, by the way, Atlanta has a black woman mayor and a white woman chief of police, just to let everybody know. So I'm going to go ahead and give one of my adopted homes of Atlanta a shout out, because it deserves it. A good question, because I'd love your opinion on this. Financial service and industry has had an image of the city of London and Wall Street. How do we improve that image? So that's a good question. I'll give my 2 cents. Linda, I'd love to get your voice on this. One, it's having leadership speak out. That's how you improve the image. I actually think coming through this COVID crisis, banking as a whole has tried and has done a much better job than they did in 2008 and 2009 from using empathy as a standing point. But I would find the top voices at those companies and have them speak out. So, for example, at Citi, they had their CFO write a piece on his take on the racial injustice that's happening in the U.S. He just happens to be black, and it was one of the most compelling pieces I've heard. We've talked about Goldman Sachs and their executive that wrote about his experience of being a black man in leadership and calling Goldman Sachs out. I think this is hearing the voices of leadership within the companies.
Yeah, I would agree. Totally agree with that. Leaders in the company of all races have an obligation to speak out about this. Not to run from it, not to hide, shy it away, because that's really what we've all done. But now is the time that they speak out. If you are a black leader, share your experiences, share what that feels like to be a black person anywhere in this world, especially in our country, but anywhere. Share those feelings, but be transparent about it and really talk about it. Get out there and talk to your employees. Get out there and talk to your customers and make it known that you're doing this, that you really have an appetite for learning and listening. I know just me personally, when I started reaching out to my black and brown friends and saying, coming from a place of, I don't understand, I want to learn. That did so much to just throw the gauntlet down and let's just talk real. And it was really, really so helpful and beneficial for me. And that's what I think company leaders need to do too.
Yeah. So Sunaina, who's going to be on our show, I believe next week, later this week. She's been an active participant as a listener of this show. And again, see, if you follow us and you're commenting, odds are we'll get you on the show. Oh, Sunaina's on tomorrow. Oh, awesome. She recommended Hit Refresh by the CEO of Microsoft. That's Satye, and I can never pronounce Satye's last name. Talks about how he used empathy to lead innovation and transform his company to success. Amen. Microsoft has been a stellar story there. All right, Linda, I'm going to give you the last word on this. If you can make one recommendation or two recommendations. You talked about empathy, you've talked about listening, you've talked about reaching out to people with different life experiences. Anything else you would add to that?
I would say that it's not enough to just say you're trying to reach a goal of a more diverse and inclusive company. you actually really have to show that you're doing this. You have to be transparent. You have to put numbers to it. You have to be accountable for it. And you have to really prove it to your employees. They need to see it in action, and they need to feel like they're heard. And if that all does happen, and I've seen too many times where companies just say they're doing it and they're checking it off a list, which is why diversity and inclusion have kind of become a dirty word almost out there. And I saw that, at Money 2020, people didn't want to go to sessions that said anything to do with diversity.
Yeah.
But if you really put those practices into place, it really is a win-win for business. But more importantly, it's a win for society too. And I think that's what we all need and crave right now. Bottom line.
Agree. I would say my summary is actions speak louder than words. For those that have protested, and I've been part of that, that's great. You better damn vote. You better, it's not enough. Otherwise, you're just making a speech. And
that's right.
Talking is, in my opinion, it's a good thing to do. It's great to have empathy, but actions speak louder than words. Go out and mentor somebody. Talk to somebody who has a different life experience than you. Understand the worldview. The older I get, the more I learn how much I don't know.
That's right.
I mean, that's just imperative. Get out there and learn. All right, folks, we're up against the clock, so I apologize. Linda, thank you for coming here. What's the best place for people to reach out and be able to contact you?
Just find me on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
I'm happy to talk to anybody and everybody that approaches about this or anything else. So it's been great.
You're looking for a mentor? There you go. Everybody, thanks. Everybody, thanks. Tomorrow, I'm joined by Sunaina, who's going to now tell me how to phonetically pronounce her last name. Sunaina, I love you. I really do. She's at M Science, brilliant young leader out of New York. We will talk a lot about AI. We're going to talk a lot about data and analytics. It's going to be a good show tomorrow. Again, if you know someone who'd be perfect to come on the show, reach out to me at Sam Maule on Twitter. I'd love to talk to you there. You can get on me on LinkedIn, or you can just go sam@11fs.com, or just ping breakfast show at 11fs.com. Everybody, please have a little empathy. Get out there, talk to folks. Again, actions speak louder than words, and I'd love having you all as part of this audience. We'll see you tomorrow.
Thanks. Bye.